Hello, everyone. So nice to have you all here with us. I'm speaking to you from my home in Northampton, Massachusetts, the western part of Massachusetts in the United States. And we're just going to do some brief introductions. I'll just speak for a couple of minutes and then pass it off to Shalana and Felipe and David. And the session that we're here to talk about is about policy. How do we turn our values that we all share for the incredible importance of the night sky for culture and for science and for our well-being and our health and the health of all living creatures? How do we turn those values into policy? And we have three fantastic guests here with us today. I'll start by just telling you a little bit about myself. I'm a professor of astronomy at Smith College here in Northampton, and I'm a longtime supporter of dark skies, and I lead a local group here in Northampton. I lead a statewide chapter of DarkSky International. I'm active at the national level with the American Astronomical Society, and also at the international level. We've recently had a number of very sort of high-profile conferences and other events relating to dark skies, largely motivated by the new threat to dark skies coming from satellite constellations. But there's a long-standing international effort of professional astronomers, including in collaboration with the United Nations. And so at all those levels, from the most local of my neighborhood up to the world itself, I'm active and always eager to learn more how to be more effective. And I'm very happy to be able to share the session with three experts who also have deep experience in implementing policy. And let me hand it off now to Shalana for an introduction.
Thank you so much, James. Hi, everybody. I'm so thrilled to be here under one sky with all of you. My name is Shalana De Silva. I'm an advocacy and policy specialist. I have been working in the landscape stewardship space for the last 15 years and really focused on equity and justice in that context of land and water protection. I'm a new learner when it comes to dark and quiet sky issues, and I am just having an absolute blast learning about the priorities related to dark and quiet sky protection and how they implicate biodiversity protection, public health, and environmental justice as well. And I'm just really pleased to be here with all of you. Thanks.
And now, David Smith, would you mind please giving a few words of introduction?
Hi, everyone. David Smith here. I'm a Social Change and Advocacy Officer for a UK-based NGO called Buglife. We are devoted to conserving all invertebrate species and making sure that they are able to do all of the small things that help to run the planet. My job there is really to change laws and behaviours to better protect invertebrate species. And my background is in policy and campaigning on environmental issues, ranging from water quality to single-use plastics, land use change. And my experience with dark skies really has only come about in the past 3 years or so, but fully involved in it now at a local, national, regional, and international level. So I'm really pleased to be here sharing the platform with some excellent advocates, and yeah, looking forward to learning as well as sharing some of our thoughts.
Thank you, David. Welcome. And now, before I turn it over to Felipe, let me remind everybody, including especially people who are just arriving, Felipe will be speaking in Spanish. And if you don't understand Spanish, you can use the caption feature and have Zoom translate it for you automatically into your preferred language, English or otherwise. And if you don't know how to find that, you should find it at the bottom of your screen, possibly in the 3-dot more section. Look for captions, and turn translation on, and then choose the language that you want to translate into. And now, Felipe, would you please say a few words to introduce yourself?
Thank you, James. Hi, everyone. Me presentaré en español, después haré el esfuerzo de poder hablar, digamos, los temas importantes en inglés. Mi nombre es Felipe Loaiza Arias, soy profesional del Ministerio del Medio Ambiente en Chile. Estoy encargado de la gestión de la contaminación lumínica en nuestro país y actualmente estoy encargado, digamos, de la redacción de la nueva norma lumínica que tenemos en nuestro país y que hoy en día será una norma lumínica nacional. Así que estoy muy contento de estar en esta sesión, de poder compartir nuestra experiencia en Chile con el mundo y con todas las personas que son entusiastas de la protección de los cielos.
Muchísimas gracias, Felipe. Y bienvenido.
Gracias.
To begin, I'm just going to throw out a question for the three of you that I hope will perhaps resonate with most of our audience. And if I can ask you the following, as we all know, effective outdoor lighting policy is important really at all levels, from the local to the regional to the national and international. But if somebody is just beginning in light pollution policy, what would you say is a good starter project? Do you think we should shoot for the moon, or think small and achievable and fun or serious? And what is your advice from you experts in policy for other people, how to get involved in making a change in policy at whatever level is possible or appropriate for them? Shalana, would you like to start?
Sure, James, I'll start. Such a good question, right? What is the invitation, essentially, is what I hear you asking. I think for me, as a community organizer, it really starts with community connection. So are you an astronomer? Are you an expert in dark sky protection? Then you have knowledge to share. Are you like me and you're learning about this issue and you just have a passion for it? Then you can seek out information, resources, educational materials, things like that. But it starts with community. So I would suggest, and Dark Sky International is such an amazing organizational hub to find community through the Advocates Network, right? So you can find, like, is there a local Dark Sky chapter that you can get connected to? Can you attend an event, an astronomical event where you're viewing the stars and learning about dark sky protection from others? And I think just building that sense of community is a really important piece so that you can be informed about all the way the issue itself shows up in life. And so you can become, grow into that advocacy role.
Thank you, Shalana. It's about relationships, isn't it? And and we can't lose sight of that, and we should harness the power of relationships and community.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Felipe, what would you like to add to that?
Yo creo que tal vez lo más importante para nosotros, por lo menos desde Chile, ha sido, en primer lugar, darnos cuenta de que la luz puede ser un contaminante, y eso es algo que muchas personas no tienen en cuenta hoy en día. No, a pesar de salir en la noche, ver en un cielo totalmente brillante, nada de estrellas, ellos no piensan que eso es contaminación. Y yo creo que parte, digamos, de la conciencia que se debe generar en las personas tiene que ver con eso. Y de ahí me voy a otro tema que también tiene que ver con educación, educación en todos los niveles, desde niños pequeños, entender cuál es el valor digamos, del cielo, el valor de la noche, ¿cierto? Que tanto para astronomía como salud, biodiversidad, etc. Creo que desde esos niveles tan pequeños hasta luego ya, digamos, niveles mayores, universitarios, etcétera, es generar una conciencia común de que esto es algo que debemos preservarlo. Si finalmente los ciudadanos comunes y corrientes digamos, no solamente expertos como tal vez muchos de los que están participando hoy en día, ciudadanos comunes y corrientes, se dan cuenta del problema y de este tipo de contaminación, de seguro tendremos gran parte del camino ya recorrido y podremos implementar cualquier medida que, digamos, sea necesario para controlar el problema. Porque la gente no se va a cuestionar, tal vez, si es que esa medida es buena o no, sino que lo van a ver como algo necesario. Entonces creo que aquí la clave es la educación y este tipo de actividades creo que apuntan mucho a eso, ahí lo que comentaba Chilena, de hacer comunidad, súper importante también. Pero claro, para agregar justamente a eso, comunidad informada y esta comunidad que se haga mucho más grande todavía y con, como digo, con personas comunes y corrientes también, que hay que invitarlas a esto.
Thank you, Felipe, for that message about the importance of education to raise awareness. And David, now can you respond what you think would be a good starter project for somebody just getting into this and wanting to inform policy? What's the entree?
The first thing I can tell everyone to do, and anyone can do this, is make sure that you get your own policy sorted in your own homes. Light pollution is one of those brilliant things where we have such an opportunity to solve a problem that we create ourselves with our own light. So making sure that, you know, we're using light in the correct way. That may not seem like a huge deal, but it will be a huge deal to the small animals or the ecology that's just outside, you know, your garden or your window. And then you can actually see the difference that you can create, and take that one step further, then take that to your neighbors, take that to your family, your friends. Everyone you tell about this, it's going to then be influenced. And we start to build a wave of movement. It's brilliant to shoot for the stars. It's, you know, that energy is great, and we can direct that. But what we really need to do is just make these small little changes that we can make, that we can see impact, we can see effect, because that will give everyone that opportunity to tell a story. And when they tell that story, then they'll pass that story on, and it moves and grows. So I really encourage everyone to follow the advice that Shalana and Felipe has said around building and finding a community. But don't forget to kind of actually carry out these actions yourself. It's very easy to look beyond our own actions.
Thanks for that reminder, David. And speaking of telling stories, can you all three please think of a story to share with us about finding an ally or a group of allies? We cannot do this alone. We astronomers, for example, professional astronomers, tend to think that you know, the sky is sort of our business, and we're the experts at it, and so that we should be in charge of solving light pollution. But how well is that going? Not very well. And we have only recently, I think, as astronomers, come to realize the absolute necessity of partnering with many other groups and ways of thinking and organizations and people, and it's so much more than just astronomy. So can you please share a story from your own experience of of how you found an ally who was not already part of your circle, and harnessed that power to help protect dark skies? Shalana, would you mind, if you can?
Yeah, I appreciate this question about allyship and essentially solidarity, James. I think the issues that we are facing today are so complex and interconnected that we are really seeing we can no longer take these issues on our own or within our own sort of group, right? We need to reach out and find where those intersections connect to other communities and other people and other allies. I was thinking there's so many examples from organizing work that I've done that I can speak to, but one that is going to date me, I will share. I was doing community organizing after 9/11, the attack on the Twin Towers here in the United States. And we were wanting in my project to share about the policy implications that were impacting immigrant communities. And we found so much allyship with established communities of color in urban places around the country, who were not necessarily impacted directly by the new immigration related policies that came after 9/11, but were systemically marginalized, harmed through related policies. And we were so much stronger by reaching out to these communities and telling a story that had a through line from, you know, the establishment of the US government, right, all through history, how the different policies impact different communities of color, and the sort of narrative through line for that, I think really brought the story of impact post 9/11 to life and showed the diversity of impacts as well, which of course, I think the important message there is the more friends you can bring into your policy work with shared priorities and intersectional approaches, the more support you gain, whether it's from decision makers, elected leaders, whoever. So it's really important to stand together.
Thank you for that message of solidarity, Shalana. Felipe, do you have a story that you can share with us about finding allies to protect dark skies?
Sí, también, bueno, acá en Chile nosotros iniciamos los esfuerzos de proteger nuestro cielo, particularmente por las características que tiene el cielo en el norte para la astronomía. La astronomía científica acá es muy, muy fuerte. Hay prácticamente todos los consorcios astronómicos, digamos, están puestos, tienen observatorio aquí en Chile. Y en los años 90, en esa preocupación por la contaminación lumínica que ya en ese momento estaba afectando a los observatorios, ellos se acercaron en ese momento era a lo que era el Ministerio del Medio Ambiente, tenía otro nombre, digamos, para sugerir de que había que trabajar en una norma ambiental para poder proteger los cielos de la contaminación lumínica. Y ese, digamos, fue el primer nexo que conectó al mundo científico con medio ambiente. Y es una relación que, digamos, se ha mantenido y se ha fortalecido en el tiempo. Y ahora, digamos, ya un poco más cercano a cuando comenzamos el proceso de esta nueva norma lumínica, ¿cierto? Esta comunidad digamos que era muy concentrada en el mundo astronómico, se abrió finalmente, porque vimos que el problema ya no solamente era un problema astronómico o tal vez de turismo astronómico o gente que trabajaba con el cielo, por ejemplo, sino que también era un problema de biodiversidad. Y ahí conocimos a organizaciones que protegen la biodiversidad, aves migratorias en particular. Conocimos también a todo digamos, varias universidades que se dedican a la investigación justamente de los impactos de la contaminación lumínica. Por otra parte, conocimos a gente que trabaja en temas relacionados con la salud de las personas, ciclos circadianos. De hecho, acá tenemos un profesor que estuvo trabajando con el grupo que ganó el premio Nobel hace unos años atrás, John Ewert. Y también, por ejemplo, con el mundo que vi por ahí, que está Paulina Villalobos, con ella también que representa a los diseñadores de iluminación, que es una voz muy importante que debemos escuchar también para poder caminar hacia una norma, digamos, o sea, un estándar. Entonces, finalmente, este proceso, digamos, abrió esta comunidad y ya no somos solamente astrónomos o medio ambiente tratando de empujar esto y poder, digamos, llegar a controlar el problema, sino que es necesario poder tener ese apoyo y la contribución y la visión de cada uno de estos expertos también para finalmente poder construir una visión común. Yo creo que eso ha sido, por lo menos para nosotros, un camino muy lindo que hemos recorrido y que hoy día nos tiene con una comunidad muy activa en términos de investigación y de ver qué es lo que también nos depara el futuro a partir de ahora.
Felipe, thank you. Your story reminds us of the crucial connection between protection of the night sky and environmental policy in the most general sense. And it's a point that I think is often lost on even dark sky advocates. Maybe most of us know about it, but most people in the general public do not. And here in the United States, for example, and internationally, it's been very difficult to link dark sky with the environment, to treat light pollution as pollution in the same way that we consider air pollution and water pollution, which are profoundly regulated in most nations in the world as pollutants of the environment. And we have our work to do to make it true for light as well. David, can you share a story with us about finding allies?
My story is my story of what's got me here. So as I say, working 3 years ago when I joined BugLife and was given the brief to work on light pollution as a priority policy, I expected I'd be working with other environmental NGOs working on species, and instead I find myself working with astronomers and lighting designers and lighting engineers, and this completely new sector to me. And we, I found this community who we're now working together very closely, sharing information, sharing opportunities, and I think really building this movement to try and overcome some of those issues that you mentioned, James. And for me, it really comes back down to that idea that no one's going to protect what they don't already know about, and no one's going to protect the things that they've not yet experienced. And for me, I still haven't really ever experienced a fully dark sky. And for a lot of astronomers that I've spoken to, I hadn't really considered, the small things that my organization's looking for, the fireflies and the beetles and the moths. And, so bringing those two things together, we're now able to look at those shared opportunities to add strength to our individual voices. And that's that whole idea of building a movement. So my experience and my story really is, it's got me here today, and it's allowed me to have this platform. So.
Thank you so much, David, and so glad to have your policy expertise and insect and bug and moth protection expertise joining this effort. I want to ask one more question for the three of you, and then turn it over to questions from our audience, other people online. And that is the following: in our recent report to the United Nations Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space, the Dark and Quiet Skies 2 report suggested specifically that nations should consider regulating light pollution in the same way that air pollution and water pollution is regulated, in the sense that we set a cap on the amount of damage that can be tolerated. For example, we measure the brightness of the sky, and when it reaches a certain maximum brightness, we say no more. Now cities and towns and industries, whatever, must change somehow. It's a form of regulation that we are used to with air pollution and water pollution. What do you think, you policy experts, about the prospect of introducing this concept at the state level, the regional level, or even the national level? Felipe, would you like to begin?
Yeah, thank you. Aquí en nuestro país, si bien tenemos esta norma lumínica desde el año 1998, en el año 2019 nosotros incorporamos dentro de la Ley de Bases Generales del Medio Ambiente, que es como la ley, digamos que es como el paraguas tal vez de toda la gestión ambiental que se hace en nuestro país. Incorporamos la luminosidad artificial o luz artificial, tal vez como para la traducción, como un contaminante, en el mismo nivel que la contaminación, digamos, del aire, del agua, ruido, radiación electromagnética, etc. La pusimos en el mismo nivel. Y esto justamente nos nos da pie a una gestión más integral, tal vez, donde finalmente nos permite conversar con otros, conversar con otros servicios públicos, con el privado, ¿cierto? Y hacerles ver de que esto no es simplemente quizás un problema local, un problema que a lo mejor se puede resolver de una manera muy sencilla, sino que es un problema, tiene impactos reales en la salud, en la biodiversidad. Nosotros acá en nuestro país tenemos un problema muy grave con biodiversidad afectada en el norte, donde hay aves migratorias caen de miles, ¿cierto? Entonces es un problema. Y ese paso nosotros lo dimos en el año 2019 y es lo que nos ha permitido justamente eh, tener un marco, digamos, un poco más fortalecido en ese sentido. Y después tal vez algo que también creo que es muy importante reconocer en esto es también escuchar a la ciencia. Creo que eso para nosotros ha sido, digamos, un piso firme sobre el cual trabajar. Los antecedentes que la misma DarkSky Association o otros investigadores en el mundo, ¿cierto? Han podido entregar. Nosotros los hemos justamente utilizado como base para poder, en este sentido, fortalecer nuestra regulación. Entonces, em, como primer paso para nosotros, creo que el reconocerlo como un contaminante, así como otros, ha sido un paso fundamental y que nos va a permitir a nosotros fortalecer la gestión. Y también nosotros, bueno, nuestra normativa hoy en día es una norma de emisión que, digamos, va a la fuente emisora, a la luminaria que se instala en la calle, en el estadio. Pero también tenemos, digamos, en carpeta, pensando en el futuro, en cómo podemos regular esta contaminación desde el punto de vista que tú lo comentabas, James, desde el punto de vista de calidad, ¿cierto? Un nivel que no se puede pasar a pesar de que, digamos, que las normas puedan cumplirse o no, digamos, por fuente, este estándar de calidad no puede ser superado. Y ese tal vez es como el futuro en términos de nuestra regulación y ciertamente reconocer la luz artificial como contaminante nos va a fortalecer y nos va a ayudar para poder lograr ese objetivo.
Thank you, Felipe, for the inspiration that Chile has offered the rest of the world. It's so important for us to have models. And as I often say, and I'm sure many of you will agree, the strongest force known in the universe is peer pressure. And and having the government of Chile recognize light pollution as pollution on a par with other kinds of pollution is an excellent example for other nations to follow. Shalana, would you like to add to that? Just to repeat the question, it's what do you think about a general policy approach of limiting the amount of damage from light pollution in the same way we limit the damage from air pollution or water pollution?
Yes, I so appreciated. There's so many gems within what you shared, Felipe, following the science, right? Establishing clear definitions as a foundation. There were a lot of gems in what Felipe shared. Because this is a workshop, I want to just share a few slides, if I might. I know okay. I'm not, it looks like I'm not authorized to share slides. So let me just say that I won't say that the future is bright for advancing this policy.
You should be able to do it now.
Okay, thank you, Betty Maya. Betty Maya makes the magic happen, as we all know, for this conference. So I will just be quick with this. But to answer your question, James, I won't say our future is bright with replicating environmental policy for dark and quiet skies, but I will say it is sparkling. So what we need to do is start with a theory of change, right? And it kind of it's really about asking, how will I make this change happen? And what we've seen in the environmental space is a top-down and bottom-up approach simultaneously. So top-down meaning laws, permitting, regulatory framework changes, right? And then bottom-up, educating and galvanizing the community, bringing in local decision makers. And I think this is a replicable model for dark and quiet sky protection. And then when you're thinking about your theory of change, these are some questions that you can ask. And I know there are so many powerful dark and quiet sky advocates in the room with us right now, so this may seem very basic, but I just wanted to provide these as a framework. If you're doing your work locally, you're wanting to reach out regionally or to the state or go across nations and think about partnerships at these different scales, hopefully this framework will help. So who has the power to deliver on what I want? Who do those people listen to? What is motivating for them? What are the incentives, right? And then we really want to make sure that we consider and embed equity in every step. As we talked about at the beginnings, allyship is so powerful. Engaging communities is where it's at. So that's what equity is for and helps guide us. You got to define the goal. We really have to be clear about what is it that we're trying to achieve with any policy effort, right? Clarify that, be specific, make sure your goal attends to equity. Then who is your target? Who's the specific person or group who can help you deliver that goal? And can you talk to them? Can you reach out to them? Can you get a meeting? Try, right? Then there's usually a secondary target. Who influences, right? Who are the people who influence an elected official who has the authority to approve a new resolution or approve a new law, right? And what are the relationships around that person? And can you figure that out? And then the target audience, we always want to know who are the group of people that can further influence those targets that we talked about. And this is where grass tops power comes into play, right? Where there are larger organizations that you can partner with, or as individuals can come together and think about influencing those larger organizations. It's all about that web of relationships. And then this is the part that I think is maybe the most attainable or interesting or fun to think about, which is the messaging, right? And this is where your strategy comes to life. What are the strengths that you have? What are the weaknesses of your opponent? Tie your messaging back to goals. And then with your messaging, you got to figure out your tactics, right? So what are the events, the media attention that you can get that influences your target? How do you build a drumbeat, right? How do you share about the wins along the way? And again, that always has to tie back to your goals. And then you celebrate a win like the one Felipe shared. And I know David has some really good concrete examples as well, but you celebrate and you repeat, you refine and adapt your strategy. You keep building those relationships and you keep going. So I don't know, James, if that answers your question specifically, but I think there's, this is a framework that we use in the environmental space to advance policy that's beneficial for restoration and land and water protection. And I think there's a lot of replicability here for dark and quiet sky protection.
Thank you, Shalana. There's nothing like direct how-to, and that was a very clear summary of how to be an activist in whatever field turns you on. But here we are talking about light pollution, and I agree with everything you said there, and it seems like good advice. And I'm happy that you shared it here, and I know that it will be recorded, and you're probably making slides available, and people can turn to it who don't have the experience yet that you have, but want to learn. So thank you so much. And David, what is your reaction to the possibility that that light pollution can rise to the seriousness of air pollution and water pollution in, for example, national regulation, and how to get there?
I think it's a very realistic ambition for us to have, and it's one that we should be aiming for. We should be demanding that those policies that the science says that we need. And when you look at some of the other environmental targets, there's far less evidence behind them. And those targets have been set in legally binding standards. I think for light pollution, we are progressing. We are nearly there. We just need that step for light to go from being a emerging pollutant or a pollutant we know more information about to being one of those pollutants that's recognized. An example of nearly being there come from the outcomes of the Convention on Biological Diversity earlier on last year, maybe this year, where so this is COP15. So this is the United Nations treaty to come together to help protect, restore biodiversity on the planet. and we were able to get light pollution in those discussions right up to the very final form of discussions. It was there in the draft text, and it ended up getting kind of amalgamated into the overall action on just pollution. So it's there. It's just not perhaps formally there yet. We're kind of just one step behind. But as we start to see different nations now, such as Chile, bringing forward light pollution laws at a national level. And when we start to see the outcomes of COP15, and we start to see nations putting forward their plans on biodiversity and how we're going to solve biodiversity, we may well see light pollution targets coming forward. And it just takes a few nations to start kind of doing the action for others to kind of pay attention, kind of go, something's happening here. We need to do something. We need to be seen as the world leaders. And like you say, that peer pressure between nations is a very truthful thing to get that at a national level. And that's vital, you know. Legally binding targets on any pollutant is vital for the environment. It's vital for biodiversity. I'm just going to apologize. You may hear some banging in the background. My neighbors have just decided to have a fireworks display. Well, I assume that's what's happening. It's the night and the weekend here in the UK, and it's fairly common at this time of year. So apologies for that. But just to come back to legislation and legally binding targets, the importance of them is that they govern what needs to happen, and that doesn't just happen in one moment. It transcends governments, so it lasts for sessions. It has longevity for that change to happen, and it doesn't then just rely on voluntary application. It's something by which the world can benefit, or the environment can benefit, because we have that law in place to really take action to make sure we see that change come together.
Thank you so much for that, David. I love the emphasis on biodiversity. I love the connection to what's happening at the highest levels of COP15, and I love the message that you reiterated. It takes only a few countries, just 3 countries or so, to put it in everybody else's consciousness. And so let's call that an invitation to all the participants at the workshop today to think about how you might actually have an avenue to your country's representation at United Nations level biodiversity and environmental protection conferences. And I know that DarkSky was actually in, I guess it was Montreal. Ruskin, you can probably tell us about this, arguing that light pollution should be included in the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and we'll get there yet. In the remaining minutes, I will turn to some comments from participants. Here's a comment from Dean Kurath. We merged with a local environmental advocacy group called the Methau Valley Citizens Council. I'm not sure where that is. That also addresses land, water, and air quality issues. They were missing the sky, so now we address all 360 degrees of our world. So there's another nice example of this partnership. And here's a question from Ryan Cantrell. I've spent time in Llano, Texas. It's Bortle around 4, so that's sort of suburban skies, or maybe partly rural skies. And it's where my interest for the night sky began. It has no ordinances, to my knowledge, and I believe its sky is being threatened by urban sprawl. How could I go about approaching Llano County Hall about light pollution? Who would like to address the question from Ryan? How to start in your local county?
I'll jump in, but I really want to hear, also leave space for David and Felipe, who have advanced this type of specific policy, I think, in their locations. I think, you know, to start with county government, which is often overwhelmed here in the States and doesn't have a lot of capacity, I think I would start with trying to get a meeting with one of your county officials, one of your elected officials, ideally someone who you voted for or someone whose district you are in. They are accountable to you. And if you were to be able to organize a friendly meeting that's educational, just to introduce them to the concept of light artificial light as a pollutant and the impacts. And if you had a really cool one-pager that you can leave behind with them, I think that's a great place to start. It's a conversation, it's an invitation for more, and then that's your entry point. You have that connection, then you and your community, your colleagues can continue that conversation and advance it into the stage of actually drafting, getting support for, and hopefully passing legislation.
Thank you, Shalana. So easy to make that first call. I mean, it seems like a lot, but you don't lose anything by making the ask, and it just doesn't hurt to ask, and it won't happen if you don't ask. So ask for that meeting.
That's exactly right. I just want to give everybody permission to like pick up the phone and make that phone call and ask. Yeah.
Shalana, while you're unmuted there, can you also address the direct question? Can we get access to your slides? Will you provide those for us later?
Yes, in fact, I'm trying to load them into the chat right now.
Oh, great. Super.
So yeah, thank you, James.
Yes. And Felipe and David, any response to the question, how do I start with my local county that has zero regulation?
Yo les puedo comentar que, al menos acá en Chile, quienes se encargan digamos, del alumbrado público, al menos, y de también otorgar permisos, por ejemplo, a otros posibles instaladores de luminarias, como un estadio, una industria, etcétera, son los municipalidades. No sé cómo será en otros países, pero finalmente quien otorga ese permiso y quien instala también luminarias para alumbrado público, yo creo que a ellos hay que llegar directamente y en muchos casos con antecedentes fuertes, digamos, con información sobre los impactos. Creo que eso puede tener muy buen resultado al momento digamos, de que ellos tengan que tomar una decisión respecto de qué es lo que van a instalar como iluminación o hacer ciertas consideraciones para justamente tener en cuenta este problema de la contaminación lumínica, porque como ya lo hemos venido diciendo durante la sesión, muchas veces alguien que está a cargo de todo un territorio, un municipio, un territorio grande, ¿cierto? Tiene muchas preocupaciones y tal vez no sabe que esto es un problema más y que también puede ser fácilmente solucionable en términos de incorporar esta variable y diseñar una iluminación para la ciudad, digamos, que incorpore esta variable y que controle la contaminación lumínica. Entonces yo creo que uno de los tal vez primeros pasos que se pueden dar es justamente ir y conversar con el gobierno local y hacerle ver de que esto es un problema y también mostrarle que existen justamente alternativas para poder solucionar el problema. El problema, nosotros acá en Chile hay mucho temor con que esta norma va a oscurecer las ciudades y es todo lo contrario. Tiene que ver con hacer un buen uso de la luz, un uso sostenible de la luz, de la iluminación, un uso sostenible que, por cierto, se haga cargo de la eficiencia energética, pero que también haga un buen uso de la luz y que ilumine solamente lo que debe iluminar, ¿cierto? Entonces, cuando nosotros llevamos eso a nuestro gobierno local, podemos tener un muy buen resultado.
Thank you, Felipe. Is it okay if we invite you to come and meet with our local government, because you do such a good job? David, in the remaining seconds, would you care to respond also with your advice for how to engage local government?
Yeah, I think first thing is just to not be afraid of engaging with local government. People see elected officials as being kind of, on a pedestal and kind of hard to connect with, hard to chat to. But in my experience, they are there to serve you as their constituents, as their their community. So they want to listen to you. There is an active desire to listen to the people that fundamentally they're trying to gain votes from. So speak to them, look for opportunities, write to them, pick up the phone, look for community sessions that they may have to just raise this awareness of light pollution. And they'll be able to then help you navigate that process of changing policy in that local area. And obviously it differs around the world, but don't be afraid to do it. It's really not that complicated, perhaps doing myself a disservice as a professional advocate, but it really is something that anyone can do. Just don't be afraid, be confident, find the allies to go with, and take your story to them.
Thank you all so much. We are at the end of our time. Stories, don't be afraid, grassroots, organize, pick up the phone, all these terrific organizational, inspirational messages. It's been an honor and a pleasure sharing this session with you three, Shalana, Felipe, and David, and so happy to have the rest of our over 120 participants on the call today, who I'm sure all have taken away a lot of really useful and inspiring messages from you three. Thank you so much.